Now we are moving to the last part of the poem Vaninatmabhavun Iswarane Saranambu Vedadan. The meaning of which is I pray for surrender to his soul who is God. Bhakti is an act of offering our prayers to God. We can also say that it is dedication to some supernatural power, generally called as God. We express this dedication or sincerity or devotion or submission by way of performing puja or prayers. Since we perform puja regularly, it is important to know what is the sanctity and purpose of this act. First and foremost thing is that puja is performed not for the sake of God but for our own upliftment. Generally, a fear psychosis is created in us that non performing of puja is a sin and punishable. In some way, it drives us to perform this act under routine or compulsion. It is like a two-way road, one side beneficial and the other detrimental. When we understand that puja is to be performed for our own uplifting, the fear psychosis is gone and non performing of puja does not become a worry. It is not my intention to encourage non performing of puja but to advocate performing of this act with willingness, belief, dedication, and devotion. Then only you will get wonderful results. Any amount of time spent before the deity without the above mentioned qualities may not give the required peace and tranquility. Let us look into the process of performing puja and its hidden implications. Generally, we present ourselves before the portrait of deity, light the lamp, make offerings like coconut, banana, etc., and pray for the well being of us and our family. We chant mantras or prayers, ring the bell, and perform Deepa Aradhana. A little introspection into the intent can be revealing. Lighting the lamp before the deity each time is a reminder to us about the need to light up the eternal light within us. The purpose of lighting the lamp before the deity is achieved when we become aware of eternal light within each one of us after a long and sustained effort. All puja material teaches us either selflessness or sacrifice or purity. In the picture of selflessness, you see a coconut breaks itself to give clean water. An incense stick burns itself to spread fragrance. Flowers perish glorifying God's images. Candle melts itself to give light. So, all are an activity of sacrifice or selflessness. Great souls sacrifice their life for the service of humanity. This is the message. Let us see the implication of selflessness and selfishness. Which is better, being selfish or being unselfish? There is nothing wrong in being selfish up to some point. If somebody is looking for a job, there is nothing wrong in thinking that he should get the job genuinely competing for it. But it is definitely wrong if somebody has to bribe somebody and get the job. This is a very simple example to draw the line in between for the same act. When we are selfish, all the actions initiated by us are centered on our interests, and in view of the fact it is centered on self with a very strong bond of attachment, we are subjected to both extremes of happiness and unhappiness. Success makes us feel very happy, and failure lands us in dissatisfaction, and both of them are directly affecting us. When our focus is self-centered, prayers are also likely to be same. When we are unselfish, our actions are more oriented towards others, and attachment towards ourselves reduces. Once the attachment reduces, the effect of success and failure has less influence, and we can maintain a more balanced mind with mental peace. Also, we must note that when we do something good to others, we derive self satisfaction. We are aware that happiness and unhappiness are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes our happiness results in unhappiness to others. Really looking at it, it is not the happiness we are longing for, but the mental peace, that is, peace of mind, that we are longing for. This is felt by all of us. Whenever there is an intense activity of either happiness or sorrow, we feel the need for calmness and restore our peace of mind. There are enough stories and incidences of great people who have thrown all pleasures into wind and worked for achieving mental peace and upliftment. By being selfish, we develop a great deal of attachment like Fevicol, and it gives us immense mental pain at the time of separation. By being unselfish, we develop a tendency for detached attachment, like a coupling which can be attached and detached at will. In order to enlighten this concept of selflessness or sacrifice, we have been taught to use the above material for our worship. A coconut breaks itself to give us pure water. A candle melts itself to give us light. These are only two examples. They teach us that the path towards God is through selflessness and sacrifice. There are only two ways to approach God. Either you see everything in you, or you see yourself in everything. In other words, either you become everything or you become nothing. Comparatively, the latter option is easier to practice, and selflessness helps you to achieve this objective. I do not mean to say a person to become selfless immediately, which is impracticable. What I mean to say is that based on practicability and the circumstances, you decide the degree between the two and always try to lean towards practicing selflessness. This is what our puja material teaches us. Not to break coconut today and make chutney the next day. In the picture of offerings to God, you see puja material like banana, camphor, money, and lemon. You see, people offer money also to God in return for blessings. And you see, there are feats also, like having a flame in the mouth and then sacrificing animal. Well, there is a message that says God expects nothing but pure love from us. Sacrifice is an act of overpowering selfishness. The principle of sacrifice emanates from the concept of universal brotherhood. We make a lot of offerings to God, and many of those offerings are a reminder to all of us to learn and to make sacrifice when required. Sometimes we sacrifice our hard earned money for useful purposes of others. Every part of banana tree is used for human or animal consumption. Some people perform feats with suffering as a ritual for pleasing Almighty and also entertaining people. Some people perform animal sacrifice also as an offering for their deity. Now, let us see why and what we have to pray from God. It is a general impression that people pray that all miseries, both current and the ones that are going to come as a result of sinful deeds, to be taken away by God and all the fruits of their good work to be securely with them. Some others pray God to give health, wealth, happiness, growth, and whatnot. Sometimes they offer a share of boons to be returned to God from the boons they get from the same God. The picture tells us what happens when we share what we have. You can share food with loss of food. You can share money with loss of money. You can share pain with loss of pain. You can share knowledge with gain of knowledge. So, as you share knowledge, you also gain knowledge. And also, you see a message, stream your knowledge for the benefit of others. Now, let us see what is the real offering to God. Let us say a couple is taking breakfast with their children. The material and effort required for making the breakfast belong to the couple. The parents and the children are taking the same breakfast, say upma. Suddenly, one child feeds a small quantity of upma to parents. How do the parents feel? They feel excited and very happy, is it not? Why? It is the same upma they are also eating, and why they should feel happy? That means something is added to that upma which makes the parents feel very happy. What is that? It is the love and affection of the child which makes them feel happy. In the same way, God expects the tinge of devotion, that is love for God, which emanate from the heart along with whatever we offer to Him. Remember, He does not want devotion for His sake, but for the upliftment of the devotee. When we speak about sacrifice, we mostly mean it as a self sacrifice. However, animal sacrifice also has been in practice from ancient times and lasting even now. No doubt it is a cruel act, and every animal has a right to live like us, and it is not to be encouraged. However, the concept behind the same is to be understood. We already dealt with the concept that life is a continuous journey of birth, sustenance, and death, and the next life is decided by the effect of past actions. Now, imagine an animal being sacrificed. The animal is sacrificing its life, although under compulsion, for a great cause as an offering to the deity. No doubt that the animal struggle till it dies, but what happens afterwards? By sacrificing its life in that birth of an animal, the life ascends to a higher order in the hierarchy of life, which is a boon for the suffering it experienced. Now, coming to the person who is sacrificing the animal before the deity, if the person is totally unselfish in his act and totally uses the sacrificed animal for feeding the poor and needy, then he is rewarded for the act by divinity and he attracts no sin. If not, he must be ready for the suffering to follow. You see the picture of God's love. You see the child and mother there engaged in different activities. The child is playing with toys. As long as the child plays with toys and is happy, the mother leaves him to his play. The moment the child starts crying, the mother rushes to him and then takes care of him. In the same way, God allows us as long as we are playing with the materialistic world. The moment we express our longingness to Him, He rushes to us and gives us what we want, or if we are qualified for that, we get liberation. If anyone feels that they have played enough with this materialistic world, then it is time to cry for God. Little is known that there is no escape from cause and effect principle. Suppose we plant a mango sapling, we are certain that we will get a mango fruit only. Imagine we get an orange fruit from a mango tree, what will happen? Will it not result in utter confusion? We will not be sure of what we get when we plant something. Same logic applies here also. How can we imagine that we will be happy and well placed irrespective of our deeds? If we do good things, good only can return to us. Same thing for bad deeds also, and we must be prepared to face consequences for all our good and bad deeds cumulative. Then comes a question that if we have to enjoy the consequences of all our deeds, then why we should pray God? The answer to this question is that we pray God for present and future and not for the past which is already over. No doubt that repentance for our past and lessons learned will contribute a lot for the right direction in our present and future. This is what we have to pray God. Resolve to follow Dharma and resolve to overcome the temptations of adharma is what to be prayed before God. Pray God to give the resolve and the ability to follow the path of Dharma. Not that God will come to you and do it for you, but our repeated prayers will strengthen the resolve and can make change in the direction towards the truth which is God's abode. Bhakti can vary in degree depending on so many factors. From just saying hi to God, it can go up to immersing in God's thinking all the time, leaving attention on worldly things. There are only two options on these worldly things. Either give it up voluntarily or else it will be taken away forcefully by nature, as we have seen earlier. It is not that you give it up all at once. It can also be done step by step. Morning bhakti and evening mukti from bhakti will not help in a big way. Real bhakti does not have time and space boundaries. For effective results, we have to constantly think about God whenever and wherever we find time. You know, God is available to us 24 by 7 and is accessible from anywhere, as we have discussed. As mentioned above, the easy way to get God is to think that we are nothing. Believing this and submission of ourself resulting in total surrender is what real bhakti is all about. Any attempt to describe what is love is incomplete since love has no boundaries. Love pervades all forms, and if interpreted in a broader sense, it pervades the entire universe and is the fundamental force acting in the universe. You see in the picture different expressions of love: love for nature, love for pets, love for body, love for sister, love for country, parental love, love of friendship, adult love, etc. And then there is also in the center you see love for God is God in you. So these are different expressions of love, and the message here is crave for getting a glimpse of the divine light, and your life will be transformed. As we know, with our limited mind itself, love has many facets, some of them illustrated in the above slide. Love generates from within, though external factors have an influence. Though love starts from within, it is generated in two forms. One form is unalloyed love, that is, without any tinge of selfishness, and another form is alloyed love, that is, with a tinge of selfishness. The former is highly superior to the latter. Lust is often misunderstood as love. While love is formalized and sacrificial in nature, lust is not formalized and possessive in nature. Sex can be an act of expression of love if the same is formalized and with voluntary involvement of both parties, and the same can be a criminal act if not voluntary. To put it in its proper perspective, sex is a divine act which is responsible for sustenance of life in this world, and often it is viewed from its negative side because of social evils, and a negative impression is created. Each facet of love has its own bond on individuals or groups, and its intensity varies depending on many factors such as the circumstances in which they are placed, age, individual interest, past experience, etc. Any amount of love can be generated by our heart provided we have the heart to do so. For example, a newly married couple has love for each other, and when they have children, their love multiplies automatically, and it goes on like this for generations till they live. This includes love for parents also. In a more generic form, love can also be expressed as a force of attraction. When we talk about cosmos, the planets are attracted by stars at macro level, and at micro level, the electrons are attracted by the nucleus in an atom. The entire universe is revolving around a great attractor in an orderly way, keeping the solar systems, galaxies, and clusters intact. This can also be perceived as cosmic affinity, or in a way cosmic love. Now, coming to spiritual angle, even though it is said that man is spiritually everything, uh, it means that man can achieve the highest spiritual status provided he works for it, as he has the potential to do so. You know that milk cannot call itself as ghee until it is subjected to lot of heat and purification process. It is a permanent transformation, and ghee can never become milk again. Remaining as milk is also useful, but it gets spoiled over time. Progress in the spiritual angle requires concentration in our mind, and to concentrate our mind on the deity we believe is the best bet. In the picture, you see the progress of concentration. Uh, you see in the picture bottommost physical existence. The concentration, first we keep our concentration on the breath, then slowly we concentrate on prana, that is the next stage, and then we are monitoring our thoughts, and then we try to master the control of the mind, and then we imagine a form when our concentration precipitates, and then we are able to concentrate. We concentrate on a form, and then finally the form is dissolved, and we go to formless imagination of concentration, which is the real God, and that is called the spiritual existence. So there is also a message, march step by step to higher spiritual realms. Imagine we concentrate our mind on something shaky. How can we concentrate when the object of our concentration itself is moving or changing? So we have to take something as a reference which remains same forever. Hence we have to choose our deity and fall flat before him, as he is the only capable entity who can take us beyond the life cycle, and the process which makes this happen is bhakti. You see the picture of searching for the ultimate, a person searching for something, and there is a lamppost there, and there is darkness at a distance. This slide or this picture illustrates a story where wherein a person was seen searching for something under a lamppost. A passerby asks him what he is searching for. The person replies that he is searching for a ring that has fallen. The passerby also searches for some time but cannot locate. Then the passerby asks the owner of the ring where exactly the ring has fallen. He receives a shocking reply saying that the ring has fallen in the darkness at a distance. Impatiently, the passerby asks why then he is searching for the ring here, and the owner of the ring says that since he does not have the light to be taken at the place the ring has fallen, he is searching for the ring where the light is. This is what the picture gives a message, whether it has to be searched internally or externally to find truth. This may seem to be an extreme kind of ignorance, but we are not away from it. We all search for peace and salvation in the external world just because it is easily accessible to us. Even though we fail repeatedly to get lasting peace and tranquility in the external world, we have a tendency to ceaselessly seek for it in the external world. The real place where we can get lasting peace and tranquility and also a gateway for salvation lies internal to us, and many saints have experienced the same before declaring it. It is a natural tendency of our mind to go external, but through awareness and practice, we have to turn our attention inward and enlighten our heart. Then all the peace in the world will be ours, and we are not far from salvation. Earlier, we have said God is good, bad, and everything else in the universe. It is natural to think that it is wrong notion, as it is normally seen that we portray God as holy and embodiment of all that is right and good to us. I would like to take help of an orange fruit to dwell upon this. Typically, if we break it down, an orange fruit can be an assembly of all this. Typically, an orange fruit consists of an outer shell of orange fruit, which is the hard layer, then the fiber threads seen in orange fruit, then leaves of orange fruit, that is a thin shell containing juice buds, and juice buds, then orange juice which has sweetness, energy, and also seeds of an orange fruit is there. On the right hand side you see the box wherein everything what we have listed is there. In that you see the yellow highlighted orange fruit is everywhere. But what is the essence of orange fruit? It is sweetness and energy, is it not? We will discuss further on this. If we see the breakup of the above, we see the word orange fruit in every part, but what is the essence of an orange fruit? The essence of an orange fruit is its sweetness and nutrition, that is energy. While energy is measurable by way of calories, sweetness cannot be measured but can only be experienced. Sweetness is immaterial part which we represent as Shiva, and nutrition is material part which we represent as Shakti. To sum up, while the orange fruit is total, in essence it is sweetness and energy. Of course, the seeds are future representation of orange fruit itself. In the picture, you see the same essence of essences in a pictorial way. So, ultimate this essence is sweetness plus nutrition. In the same way, God is materially or physically represented by universe and immaterially or spiritually represented by the cosmic soul. This cosmic soul, which is the soul of souls, individual souls, is what is termed as the essence of essences, and we call it as God. We portray him as the holiest of the holy being who is all powerful, all encompassing, immortal, and making all things happen in the universe, which is his body. There is a saying, శివుని ఆజ్ఞ లేనిదే చీమ కూడా కుట్టదు, that is in Telugu, which means that without the will of God, even an ant dare not bite. The author of this poem, Bammara Potana, is a great Telugu poet, and in this poem he prays for total surrender to this cosmic soul. Having completed my presentation, I would like to present architects of my life. That is apart from my parents. This book is dedicated to my parents, as indicated in the earlier this one. The picture you see on the top is my wife, Mrs. Buddhi Manjula. She sacrificed a lot of my time for her in the preparation of this book. She is the lady behind me for all achievements in my life. The picture next to that is my eldest brother, Mr. Buddhi Ramalingam, and his wife, Mrs. Buddhi Rajeshwari. Apart from my parents, parental care and direction to my life is provided by them. My eldest brother has been a mentor in my childhood and career. The picture next to that is Mr. Buddhi Krishnamurthy. He is my second elder brother, and he is also a second mentor in my life, which I remember forever. He has shown a lot of interest in my career upcoming. Finally, and more important person is my guru and friend Sri Kamala Kannan. who was a resident in Saidapet and was working for Defense Inspection Services in auto sector. We first met in Mrs. Rane Madras Limited, Velachery in Chennai. I have learned much about spirituality from him. We have lost touch due to dislocation in and around 1985. I owe my remembrances to him. We used to have many interactions on this subject of spirituality. Thank you very much, and I hope this presentation will be of much use to you.